The Toronto Raptors are NBA champions. Congrats to them and any Raptors fan who's watching this. Or if you're a hater of the Warriors, and I know there's quite a few of those, I picked the Raptors to lose the last two playoff series. I'm happy to be wrong because this is a hell of a story. And we're just going to go down some of the players and a few of the coaches and all that stuff. We're going to talk about Kyle Lowry first. I know he's not Kawhi. We'll get to him. But I think this Raptors story in a lot of ways starts with Kyle Lowry. I mean, they almost traded him to the Knicks a million years ago, and then he became one of the best point guards in the Eastern Conference. And even after that happened, the guy's had some playoff struggles. We all know this. He's had his fair share of criticisms and clownings on NBA Twitter when he'll have some random 0-point performance. I even joined in a little bit on that, I will admit. But he just kept on coming back every season, and he's a little older now, and it was great to see him in Game 6 have maybe the best game of his career. I mean, the amount of gutsy threes that he took in that game, and just in this series overall, you knew that he had to do that for Toronto to have a real chance in this. And he did it. It seems like he took all of the storylines that have been built up for him and how he always comes up short in the playoffs and all that, and he just threw them to the wayside, and he said, you know what, I'm going to win myself a goddamn NBA Finals, and everybody on Twitter can F off, and it was pretty fun to see. Now we get to Kawhi, the best player on this team, this series, potentially in the entire NBA. I will admit, I have been maybe a little too critical of Kawhi's last season with the Spurs. While I don't think he handled it perfectly, I think it's safe to say there might have been some pressure by San Antonio for him to play. There was definitely passive aggressiveness thrown at him, and now he's saved all of Canada, so I guess that's a pretty cool 180. I don't know where he's going to go in free agency. There's going to be a lot of talk about that over the next couple of weeks, but regardless of if he stays, leaves, he and Raptor fans are always going to have this moment. It's not often that an entire fan base gets to immortalize a player. And Kawhi managed to get to that point in only one season, so that's pretty awesome. We move on to Pascal Siakam, who is probably going to win Most Improved Player. I may or may not have done a video where I picked Buddy Hield as the Most Improved Player, and yeah, I feel a little silly for it. Siakam's ceiling, I don't know what it is, because he's just in his third season and the guy transformed as a player this year. And sure, he had moments in these playoffs where he looked a little normal and he still got to get better at the threes and all that stuff. But could I see him making a couple of all-star games in his time? I would definitely not write it off. Could he be looking at some Defensive Player of the Year chances in his future? I think that's possible. Maybe he could sniff a couple of All-NBA teams. All of these things are in play for a guy who at 24 years old just kind of exploded onto the scene. And if Kawhi stays, that's a hell of a 1-2 punch to lead this team for the next X amount of years. We move on to Fred VanVleet, who hit some of the gutsiest shots that I can remember in an NBA Finals. Every team is desperate for this kind of a guy. The dude that you pay $8 to $9 million a season or whatever. And the guy acts like he's getting paid a lot more money than that, but he actually backs it up. This is a justifiable confidence kind of guy. The opposite of Dion Waiters, if you will. And the confidence that he showed in Game 6 when Kawhi was super tired and Lowry had cooled off was pretty wild. Now we got to look at a guy who showed up here mid-season. That's Marc Gasol. It is really cool to see at least one guy from the grit and grind Grizzlies days get a title, because that team is going to be remembered by NBA fans for a really long time. I don't think I'm ever going to forget about them. And it's nice to see the guy who was at the heart of all that get to this point. And it was also really cool to see Gasol come to Toronto and be cool with not being the number one guy, where if the Raptors needed him to just take a few threes, space the floor, fine with doing that. If they throw him down to the post, which is what he would prefer, he would do that, but if they didn't, he wouldn't complain either. Of course, his defense and his playmaking was great for these guys. I remember a stat where the Raptors were towards the bottom in assist percentage, and then they got Gasol and they boosted towards the top the last whatever games of the year. So that's pretty cool. There are other guys to appreciate. Serge Ibaka came alive offensively the last couple of games against the Warriors. I'm going to guess that his experience helped them out. He was also pretty good as a small ball 5 for them in this series when he did play that. My guy Danny Green didn't have the best finals in the world. Vanvleet was definitely the guy who should have been playing over him. But even so, he was a nice piece to a finals team. And then we had Norman Powell, who had a couple of highlight plays in the NBA Finals and also had some really good moments against the Bucks. And then, of course, the two dudes running the show on and off the floor, Nick Nurse and Masai Ujiri. Both of them deserve a lot of credit. And the real MVP is Pat McCaw, who is on pace to having a Bill Russell-esque career, 3 championships already.